Hi, I'm Debbie, and I'm a life and relationship coach. I wanted to come on and share my story today um, in the hopes of other parents to hear so that they don't feel so alone and that they can have hope um, for peace in their life. And it all started for me about 9.5 years ago when my oldest son was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, and shortly thereafter, he began using drugs. I went from the initial shock and devastation to feelings of confusion, despair, hopelessness, and anxiety as I began to navigate the many challenges I was facing with his illness and addiction. I felt overwhelmed with fear of what would go wrong, fear the next shoe would drop, what would happen next. I also felt so isolated and alone, even though I had lots of friends. And many nights I lay awake and couldn't sleep, crying in tears because I had so much fear over what might happen. I experienced so many emotional roller coasters every time he went in and out of the hospital, in and out of treatment facilities. I always had this high hope for him. And so many times it was quashed when he went off his meds or returned to using drugs. The stress and anxiety made me physically ill. I knew things for me needed to change. I knew I couldn't go on like this. And although I knew it needed to change, at the time I had no idea how. The fear was consuming me, as if there was no way out, as if it was impossible. And one day I had friends visiting me. It was New Year's Eve, and Alex had gone into the hospital for the fifth time, and I was waiting to hear from the doctors. And my friends are really supportive and really understanding. And I got the phone call from the doctor, and it went really well. And unexpectedly, as soon as I hung up the phone, I just broke down in tears right there. And it was then that I realized that I wasn't living my life anymore. It wasn't my own. I was only surviving. I wasn't truly living. And my life many times felt meaningless. I wasn't doing anything for me, but more importantly, I wasn't enjoying the moments I had with my children. Everything was consumed by fear and worry. I realized that I had a choice as to whether I wanted to focus on the fear and the uncertainty or on something that would bring me peace and healing. And I chose me. And by choosing me, I chose to enjoy the precious moments with my children. I chose not to live in fear anymore. I chose love over fear. And that made me feel empowered for the first time in a really long time. It made me feel calmer and more relaxed. At that point, I started taking control over my life. I no longer was a victim of circumstance, and I began doing things for me. Through journaling and meditation, I stopped taking things personally, stopped blaming myself, changed my expectations for my life, and rewrote my story. I was able to release the grief over the loss of the way things used to be with my son and our life prior to his illness and addiction. And when I did that, I was able to come to a place of acceptance. In doing so, I was able to embrace all of him, the whole person, feeling connected to the sweetness and kindness of his soul. I chose love and faith over fear. I realized I had no control over my son. So instead of trying to control him, I focused my energy on loving him and loving me. I felt deep compassion for him, seeing him as separate from his illness. Behind my fear, I realized there was a need for certainty. Certainty that things would be okay, certainty that things would go the way I wanted them to go. But there was no certainty. And so instead, I focused on contributing to others in a meaningful way. My children, volunteering, and through becoming a life coach. and I was able to give myself certainty in other ways daily that had nothing to do with my son. Not only did I solve being overwhelmed by fear, I also had a loving relationship with him, building precious memories that I cherish and will always remember. I was fully present for him and for my other two children. After losing him when he was 26, I knew my life would never be the same. The pain felt unbearable, and I wondered how I would ever find a way to go on. His death made me look at life in a different way and rethink everything. I knew I was meant for more, and I did a lot of soul searching as to my purpose. My mission now is to help other parents of teens and young adults with mental illness or addiction to let go of their fears and live a life of peace and purpose while building a loving, lasting relationship with their child.